One of the craziest propositions in gaming was rebooting Call of Duty 4. How do you reboot one of the most beloved games of all time? How do you make it better than ever? I'll show you. If you're like me, news of a Modern Warfare reboot struck you as clearly a blatant cash grab. I was highly skeptical. Look, they even called it the same thing. Hold up. They subtracted the number 4 from the title. Never mind, everybody. Put those pitchforks down, let's see what they've got.
Well, let's see what the kid has.
As it happens, Modern Warfare 2019 got off to a bafflingly rough start, with some of the most frustrating user interface and installation fumbles I've ever seen. But before I did that, I did something else. I replayed the original Modern Warfare, in this case the remaster from 2016, and in doing so I embarked on an intellectual pursuit for the ages, a deep dive into the icon that is Call of Duty 4, asking, was rebooting this called for? If it ain't broke, why fix it? So gather around as we sort out two of the best first-person shooters in the history of the genre, Call of Duty Modern Warfare and Call of Duty Modern Warfare. I'll never forgive Infinity Ward for this. Hey, one last note before I begin. I don't normally do this, but I'll just mention at the top of this video covers some pretty gruesome violence and some dark subject matter. If you're a sicko like me, you dig that, but not everyone does. That, and I'm going to spoil both games. Alright, let's get to it. A game which needs no introduction, Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare was the fourth main entry in the series, but the first to take players out of World War II and into the present day. It wears the trappings of 2007, modern weapons, a conflict in a nameless Middle Eastern country undergoing an armed coup, and a second plot involving nuclear proliferation in the hands of dictators and Russian separatists. But considering the year of its release, it didn't reflect the era of warfare as much as you might expect. Allied operations in the Middle East no longer resembled the blitzkrieg depicted in the invasion Call of Duty 4, but instead a long and drawn-out counterinsurgency along with a rapidly evolving counter-terror enterprise involving a never-ending cycle of intelligence exploitation and direct action raids. This isn't really featured in the game. The counter-proliferation plotline harkened more back to Cold War-era fears than the post-9/11 world of 2007, where deaths were more likely caused by a crude IED than a stolen nuke. That's not to say that these two plot lines didn't both have a place in 2007, but they resembled more what Modern Warfare could have been than what it actually was. With all that being said, Call of Duty 4 was and remains a tremendous first-person shooter. Let's jump right in. Modern Warfare 2007 opens with such a brilliant level. Like a lot of other aspects of the game, it made quite an impression on the generation who first experienced it. It puts you in a novel setting, sold by the way the level rocks all around you and affects how you move. The stormy weather, the sleeping guards, the pitched gunfights, the bit of intrigue, the airstrike that threatens to send you to the bottom, and the bonkers exfil. It still makes a heck of an impact all these years later. What a way to start a campaign. This remaster came out in 2016, so it was not created with 4K or HDR in mind on the Xbox, although you can now play it in 4K on the PlayStation. That said, I played it on the Xbox Series X, where it looked exceptional and featured Microsoft's coolest feature that no one ever talks about, Auto HDR. The remastered graphics look great. The team adopted new effects, textures, and lighting, while also boosting the resolution significantly from the original. It's a fine-looking product, and while I thought the original graphics weren't crying out for a makeover, I kinda walked that back when I saw the new hotness. The Xbox hardware takes things a step further with its proprietary Auto HDR. To its credit, the Auto HDR was obvious to me. So obvious that I played the first half of the game under the impression that the HDR was native to the game. Realizing the ultra-high contrast moonlight, flames, and other eye candy weren't shipped with the game just impressed me that much more. We get great lens effects from the rain, we get the spray, gas mask distortion, grime on the lens. They didn't just put a new layer of polish on it, they added new effects. It really works. Generally, Modern Warfare's levels are well designed. They're not very expansive and most of them feature little to no freedom to explore, but that doesn't really matter for the style of campaign they constructed. Considering how the game is ushering you from fight to set piece to fight, the actual aesthetic of the levels was always evocative to me. They do a good job of whisking you away to far-flung battlefields that seem believable for the short time you're in them. I've always had a soft spot for the skyboxes in Modern Warfare, and they look insanely good in the remaster. I don't want to make the skyboxes out to be more important than they are, but they honestly look at times like photographs just superimposed on the background of the game. And they might as well be as far as I'm concerned. Simply gorgeous work. The sound definitely got a makeover too. The AC-130 when it supports you at the end of Hunted.
Whoa, that's bloody outrageous, mate!
Yeah. The gunfire and explosions all generally sound as good or better than before. The sound of this G3 firing indoors. And I think they re-recorded all the voiceover. Some of the lines seem wrong to me.
The hell with it, we'll give it our best shot. Out.
Okay, so the technical update is surprisingly good, but that's obviously something they could and did update without rebooting the whole series. So what about the gameplay? It's still as tight as ever. Something I appreciate a lot is how they're constantly putting you in cool situations. Take a cargo ship. Play as the deposed president leading up to his execution. Blow up a bunch of tanks with a javelin. Sneak around a house with NVGs after the power goes out. Rescue this helicopter pilot before she's overrun. Shoot an enemy who's hiding behind a door and being a nuisance. Take a launch facility before nukes can blow up. It's cool scenarios and constant little tweaks on the formula to keep it interesting. When I reminisce about this game, I think of the meat and potatoes of the missions as shooting galleries. And that's true, but they are relentlessly changing the context and constraints of the various missions, so it always feels fresh, from the big to the small. It's easy to see how this made such an impact 15 years ago.
Now pull out your sidearm. Remember, switching to your pistol is always faster than reloading.
It goes without saying, but the gunplay is just so gratifying. One thing I've always loved is how many different permutations there are of enemies taking hits and staggering, or taking hits and falling, or taking hits and dying, or crawling, or getting back up. The ragdoll physics, or whatever they're working with here, they're quite good, and the staggers and deaths look eminently believable. You might see the same one twice, but it's not frequent, and it really sells the action in a way that I think can't be overstated. Weaker guns like pistols and submachine guns tend to bear this out more since they're more likely to stagger and damage an enemy than kill him outright. But if you're like me and you try to fire rifles 1 or 2 rounds at a time, you'll see it with them too. Enemies also will react differently when different parts of their body are struck. This is one of my all-time favorite things about this game. It makes your guns feel powerful, and it makes it feel like you're shooting actual people instead of polygons. Like there's more going on than decrease enemy HP until arbitrary number and then he dies. Man, I hope that sentence didn't get me put on a watch list. Some levels have strategically placed objects like stacks of papers that you can shoot and go flying, which also lends a hectic feel to big shootouts and it makes your guns feel strong. Modern Warfare 2007 was also one of the first games to feature permeable cover, which worked surprisingly well and struck a chord for increasing realism and making players feel lethal. It isn't the only shooter to feature breaching moments, but it was maybe the first I ever played. They were memorable then for their novelty, though they really upped the ante in Modern Warfare 2. One frustrating thing about the game design is the respawning enemies. You sometimes don't quite know how to advance. Your allies can help you repel the swarm, but ultimately they wait for you to trigger certain events or tripwires before they'll follow you or the next scripted thing will happen, which includes stopping enemies from respawning. This sounds fine on paper, but your allies don't always advance when you try to punch through. Meanwhile, enemies will swarm you and kill you from all directions while you wait for your allies to help. Kind of a pain. Another thing, accuracy while moving, it's not really there, which forces you to play stop-start, stop-start. You could pitch it as being realistic, but it's not even that realistic. Real dudes can shoot somewhat well while moving, especially if they're trained. It compounds some of the issues I laid out a minute ago too. Endless respawning enemies force you to advance, but you leapfrog between cover. Enemies swarm you and then you get pinned, so if you try to make a move, you die. You try to press, your allies don't always follow, so you stay put trying to clear out enemies from cover before you advance, but then more enemies might, or might not, come out. Worse, you're not always sure when enemies are endless and when they're finite. Different spots in the campaign seem to employ both tricks, so while dynamic and exciting, it's occasionally frustrating. Mission briefs are every bit the blitz that I remembered. It's easy to zone out for 5 seconds during a brief and completely miss where you're going or what you're doing. It gets even worse once Griggs joins the party and just starts talking nonsense.
It's just too hot, man. But room temperature? Please, a beer should be ice cold.
I've played this game a dozen times over and was still like, wait, which country are we in now? Oh, we're in Azerbaijan? Got it. Wait, Griggs? Griggs bails you out from Azerbaijan? How? Why? Why isn't he in the Middle East? He's with you when you assault the TV station. Shouldn't he be dead?
Yeah. Score 1 for military intelligence.
Also, why is a random team of Marines rescuing a British SAS unit half a continent away? I'm not sure about that one. Anyway, Call of Duty 4 was full of incredible, memorable moments and whole levels, which have endured in the public imagination ever since. The AC-130 mission. I mentioned earlier how this game mixed up the formula to keep things interesting and offer gamers something they hadn't seen anywhere else. The AC-130 mission is absolutely an example of both. It was exhilarating and spawned tons of clones and copycats in other games and even other genres, including the closing chapter of the Modern Warfare trilogy. A common critique of the mission is that it's not challenging and you're too overpowered. A critique I remember thinking resonated with Infinity Ward, as the AC-130 mission in Modern Warfare 3 featured more constraints on how much ammo you could throw out before reloads. It's true that there's no threat to you in the gunship and you can only fail by shooting the wrong targets, but challenges aren't the only way for games to be fun. Games can be fun by fulfilling a power fantasy, and Death from Above is a dazzling power trip. Infinity Ward wisely inserts lulls in the action to build up anticipation and keep you on your toes, and the mission is over before the novelty wears off. I'm never quite ready to give up the gunship whenever the mission is over, which I think means they picked a good length. All gillied up. The convoy walked past me on all gillied up and my heart stopped. Still such an effective moment. It doesn't seem to matter how many times I see it. A mission which needs no introduction, All Gillied Up was nearly cut from the game before release, and came to define both the game and a generation of shooter fans, airsoft players, and sniper wannabes around the world. I think it is a stroke of genius and an absolute thrill ride. I won't belabor the mission here, but I will sling my one hot take. Playing the mission this time, I was a little floored by how many times I missed the shot on Zakayev. I don't think I'd ever missed it more than once or twice before this, but I kept blowing it. I finally stopped trying to account for any of the factors besides the wind, and I nailed him. And it got me thinking about the experience, and I decided that as cool as it is, they confused me by offering all this information about the factors about to affect the bullet's flight path, only for none of them to matter. Not that it would make any sense in the context of the level, but by not having a way to test out your shot as a player until the actual moment where it matters, really deflates a lot of the coolness and momentum for the mission. Which is a shame because, like everything else in the game, it is incredibly cool and makes a lasting impression. Oh, did I mention there's a nuke detonation? Well, there's a nuke detonation. This caused quite a stir in 2007. Having a player character wiped out in a story mode is always jarring, and no one had ever imagined making the player character the victim of a nuclear weapon in a video game. Kind of frightening, kind of provocative, 100% bold. And they let the scene breathe. You really soak it in. I keep saying it, but it leaves a mark. And the nuclear threat within the story doesn't end there. Speaking of things that make a lasting impression, the casualty projections of the nuke launch has always stuck with me. I think about it a lot. It's mortifying. It's a tiny part of the video game, very easy to overlook, but it has some of the most concise storytelling in video games. The stakes are set, and they couldn't be higher. It's easy for many of us to forget or ignore the threat of a nuclear annihilation, but it's never really gone away, and seldom is it brought so centrally into view as it is in this scene, or for that matter in this scene. I completely forgot about the truck escape and the bridge showdown. Completely forgot. How did I forget? This scene is so exciting and iconic. This was genuinely groundbreaking at the time. Getting so close to defeat and then taking out Zakayev personally in such a cinematic way, it's a triumph. Overall, my impressions of this game have, if anything, gotten better with age. The new facelift doesn't hurt either. The gunplay is largely taut and satisfying, excepting some of the aforementioned nitpicks. Campaign is a masterstroke. Short, sweet, to the point. Relentlessly paced, constantly juggling new ideas, putting you in positions you've never been in before, at least when it was new, throwing you tons of bombastic events. All Gillied Up is still an absolute gem, and holy smokes, the ending. I don't know how I forgot about the ending scene. It must have rocked my ever-loving world as a kid. What's funny is Modern Warfare 2 does a pretty safe retread of a similar idea to Modern Warfare 1, but it was 2 whose ending I never forgot.
Knife the watermelon. Nice! Your fruit killing skills are remarkable.
While the 2007 campaign and setting were not quite representative of Modern Warfare, the 2019 campaign is also a bit off, but for different reasons. It involves the CIA waging an unconventional warfare campaign with a fictional rebel group against a Russian occupying force, approximating Russia's clashes with Chechnya and Afghanistan, while the SAS conducts very recognizable and authentic counter-terror operations. We even get an IED attack this time. If this game had come out even 5 years earlier, it would have been eerily familiar to the war on terror being prosecuted by Allied special operations around the globe. But in 2023, or even 3 years ago when the game debuted, it was already starting to look a little quaint. Once again, like the original game, this isn't because the presentation of warfare is wrong, but the campaign against violent extremist organizations has been winding down for a number of years now, and the focus has all but shifted to fighting our next great power competition, a new Cold War. Through no fault of the folks who conceptualized both titles, the Modern Warfare games are almost better reversed for the years that they were released. Context aside, Modern Warfare 2019 is stunning. The campaign garnered rave reviews, a return to form according to many, but in my opinion it was overshadowed by Warzone, its companion free-to-play yet highly lucrative multiplayer extravaganza. One might be forgiven for thinking that this is at least partially deliberate. Modern Warfare 2019 gets off to a rough start. Putting the game disc into my Xbox resulted in a nearly 100 gigabyte installation, but that was only the beginning. A baffling series of content packs needed to be downloaded before I could boot up the campaign, and the process to download them was needlessly convoluted. And don't take my word for it, the comment section is overflowing with similar gripes. Activision said in a message that it was to optimize the amount of storage required, but if I wanted to play only the campaign and special ops, it still required what, 4 of the packs? Why is this a thing? Pair all this with needing to create an Activision ID just to play an offline campaign by myself, which didn't even work until I used my phone, and I was grinding my axe before I ever hit start. But it did not take long for all to be forgiven, or forgotten. Modern Warfare 2019 grabbed me by the collar and didn't let go. I played it all the way through and immediately started it over again. Let's talk about the intro to Modern Warfare 2019. First of all, I'm a sucker for a good title card, and Modern Warfare 2019 tees up a stupendous opening scene straight into a perfect title card, and then this gorgeous location card. They drop you into this first level, and you're treated to beautiful, spectacular nighttime graphics. More HDR, organic this time. I felt instantly grounded in this reality, and couldn't believe how real the visuals looked. And then one of your very first actions in the entire campaign is calling in an insane airstrike that looks and sounds rad. Seriously, holy shit. From a technical point of view, Modern Warfare 2019 is among the finest games I have ever played. Considering how much money this franchise makes, I'm stoked to see it put back into the production value. Played on Series X, this game will play in 4K, HDR, and surround sound. It looks staggeringly real, and boasts some of the best sound design I've ever encountered. Hear the helicopter hovering overhead from inside a building.
Long as we take him alive, 3-1.
Roger that.
A train rumble by outside. Muffled gunshots from all around you as SAS troopers clear rooms without you.
X-ray.
A man struggling with a gun from the next room over, waiting to ambush you. It sounds exquisite. Oftentimes loud, too. Though the mixing is tricky, without subtitles, I missed a lot of the dialogue, and I sometimes wondered what they needed me to do. I did eventually turn on the subtitles after one too many times I messed up someone's command. Okay, listen to this. I swear I can hear the brass hitting the floor directly to my right. The way way it comes in from the speakers is so perfect. It makes me forget I'm listening to a video game and not hearing shell casings actually hitting the ground next to me. Guns are just loud and have an immensely satisfying report. They really crack. Dust thrown up by gunshots looks great. The blood splatter looks great. Holy smokes, this game looks great. Watching a car get consumed by flames and blow up is madness. And the sound it made of the glass progressively breaking, oh my word. The gas mask looks great, and the dialogue sounds appropriately muffled.
Let's do this.
Flashlight looks good.
Got your 6-3-1. Let's handle this.
The cutscenes are well made and beautiful. Cinematic. Compared to the mission briefs in the first game, these are next level. It's another aspect where they both fundamentally rethought how to execute something and were also able to throw piles of cash at it to ensure it's extremely high quality. The story is a little tricky to follow at first, because they introduce a number of factions to you before you're clear on who's who and who's on which side. As you play, it comes together somewhat quickly, but that was my one note about it. By the time I started my second playthrough, I was with them every step of the way. Many of the missions feature CIA with raiders. Raiders getting recognition is just kinda neat, plus it connects back to Griggs and the gang from the original game. And seeing this CIA operator embedded with them under appropriately ambiguous circumstances is authentic and kind of funny to me. I noticed when you look at someone where you once only got rank and name or nickname, now you get a call sign as well. And the Hitman call signs at the beginning are no doubt a nod to Generation Kill. Don't think I didn't see you. The campaign simultaneously feels familiar yet more restrained. Toward the beginning especially, the body count is way lower, but feels more real. You don't have to drop 30 enemies single-handedly between objectives, maybe 3 to 5, but the fights are brutish and short, tense. Each kill feels heavier because there's fewer of them and they're harder to earn. There's a lot fewer monstrous set pieces. Now, by the end we do get the exploding mines, a juggernaut fight, the helicopter finale, so it's not a complete departure, but overall the game is just much more sparing with the oh shit moments. And I think that's more effective. Do bombastic sequences conflict with the messaging or themes of the game? Is it bad to show both the horrible realities of war while also participating or gamifying them? Maybe. More on that in a bit. Similar to the original game, they repeatedly introduced new wrinkles in the formula to keep things lively. What's interesting to me is not just how many of these shakeups are important to the formula and gameplay, but how many of them are inspired or influenced by Global War on Terror. The booby-trapped door before the hostage rescue on Hunting Party is brilliant. Or take the scene where the children warn the potential combatants that you're there. The embassy scene is just like the rest of them. Thrilling, haunting, unnerving, brilliant, realistic, relevant. The game can be sheer chaos and sensory overload, probably by design. So much visual and auditory information to process, it's wild. It reminds me of SEAL Commander Jocko Willink saying that his goal was to overwhelm SEALs in training. Sequences in this game absolutely feel overwhelming the first time through. I could make a whole video just raving about how many incredible scenes they came up with. The scene where you lead the lady out is just a bit rough, but I appreciate its inclusion, putting another human face on the tragedy. And then you get the chance to save her later, which is also really cool. Especially when you succeed. Man, this rooftop battle with the flare rounds, what an inspired idea. Before the battle starts, you spend some time observing a group of guys without really knowing what they're up to other than that it seems sketchy. It's a tiny inclusion, but I found it representative of a common conundrum in, well, modern warfare, where enemies aren't in uniforms, and you might see them being shady without probable cause to intervene or schwack them. I mentioned earlier how your body count in this game is lower than the original, which is not exactly the case. There are some scenarios in 2019 where you're defending a position from waves of enemies, and you rack up a lot of kills doing that, but they feel more believable since you're not always Ramboing your way through dozens of guys while taking faces full of lead every 2 minutes. Holy shit. This sniper mission. This feels a lot like the scene in the Hurt Locker. And come to think of it, so did the bomb vest guy they throw off the balcony. You know, the house raid feels like Zero Dark 30. The London street bombing feels like a handful of things. The embassy stuff felt like 13 hours in Argo. And there might be more parallels if I dug more. Anyway, the sniper mission is one of the highlights in a game brimming with highlights. I'll note that it addressed my critique of the Zakayev shot in the original game by allowing you ample practice before showtime. And they addressed my other critique that you only get to do it once and that's it. Well, twice if you count the helicopter. But this game, to my absolute delight, built an entire mission around wasting Russians with the sniper rifle, and the devastation it wreaks is visceral. You can dismember people with it, and the way they visualize it is so gnarly. Maybe it makes me a psycho, but I just could not get enough of watching enemies get ripped apart by this rifle. The fact that they give it to us one last time before the end was also one of the biggest joys of the campaign. Sometimes the only thing better than snatching a cool thing away before it gets stale is then introducing it again after you've made peace with the fact that it's gone. I was pumped to get it back.
Cover me!
Don't stop!
Playing as Farah during the jailbreak, her aim and recoil are worse, and her reload is less polished. Cool touch. It's funny how many of my gripes they've addressed. Hard to follow cutscenes, endless waves of enemies, having a better idea of when to move up and providing allied support so you don't get stonewalled, even moving slowly and shooting accurately, select fire on guns, except not really. About that. Okay, I was stoked that they give you that basically right out the gate. Even the switch animation is correct. Whoa, and is that bullet drop? Whoa, yeah, it is bullet drop. Turns out they made every single round a physics object with ballistics and drop applied to them. Anyway, sorry, lost my train of thought. But that select fire option is not universal, i.e. not every gun in the game has it. In fact, I'm not sure I ever found another gun that did. From what I've gathered, there might be more if you pick up random guns in the campaign or multiplayer, but I don't know why they would limit it to certain guns and not others. So I wasn't thrilled about that. And I was initially excited that they added the cover, mount, and lean option, but I found the implementation is a little janky, and I would prefer to be able to just lean at will, but oh well. Unsurprisingly, there's a variety of wonderful weapons. They all look and feel great to use. I love that they brought back the hybrid sight. The little slide rack brass check for the pistol is great. Characters hold pistols at an angle before aiming them, which is tight. I also thought it was cool seeing them reach up their arm to key the radio. The reload animations are great. It's incredibly cool and also tactically useful that you can reload while aiming. Gunplay feels hefty. Battle rifles like the Scar H have a pronounced but manageable recoil, and they sound loud and good. I compare footage of the M14 from both games, and notice how much meatier the 2019 M14 both sounds and feels.
Falcon 1, standing by to provide close air support.
They double down on the permutations of damaging enemies, and it looks and feels better than ever. Some feel almost scripted, and maybe they are. Your character's walk speed changes contextually. It can be slow, but appropriate to the situation. While this robs players of their agency, it serves the purpose of fully integrating you with the pace and the actions of the mission. It didn't bother me a bit. Okay, so this game is like, oops, all controversy. For instance, maybe the most controversial part of this game is the night raid mission. By this point, I was completely absorbed in the game, and long after this mission, I was still thinking about it. It's completely brutal and amazing. I love how they handled the train movement that slows your walk speed down to theirs and how they wait for you.
Holding for you, Kyle.
As you proceed through the raid, enemies can take damage without dying, and they start to bleed out slowly. When faced with this, you can shoot them again or let them bleed out. And it's grim. A man takes his wife as a human shield, and then she picks up his gun after you kill him. The insanity of that idea is almost too easy to overlook because of how fast it happens. In this scene, you stun a man who is a threat and he tells you to wait, don't shoot.
Wait!
It's a deeply human and disturbing thing to witness. And again, it comes and goes in the blink of an eye. If you shoot him fast enough, he may not even get the line out. A woman who appears unarmed and unthreatening does not comply and gets killed going for a detonator. An all too believable and regrettable situation. But what are we to take away from this? Appreciation for counter-terror or law enforcement for being professional and having a frightening job? Disdain for them and for their actions and what they look like and their lasting effects? Taking things at face value, I'd argue that it's not obvious which direction the developers come down on this. I think you can make a reasonable case for either perspective. Infinity Ward clearly wrought this sequence with great care and attention to detail, which I don't think they would afford it if they were categorically opposed to it. That and it's a game. The fact that this is a game to play and presumably enjoy is a meta commentary on the subject, isn't it? But what if Infinity Ward came out and said, "Yo, we designed this mission to be repulsive. We hope you hated it." Could we realistically play something like that? I think we could, but also, not everyone playing this will find it repulsive, regardless of the authorial intent. I watched Writing on Games critique the Modern Warfare campaign, where he levels the accusation that gamifying things like torture and child violence trivializes them. My response is that the term gamify carries some baggage that doesn't fully work for me here. What Infinity Ward did here was interactify things, letting you experience them as the player in a way that's more involved than just watching things play out in a cutscene. I think to say that they gamify it is a little unfair. They're making an interactive experience and story. So while yes, the act of gamifying these events is philosophically questionable, I think the accusation that they are gamified is also questionable. Of course, you get an achievement if you shoot both guards with one shot as a little girl, so maybe it's gamified after all. There's just layers and layers of analysis to consider here, and I'm barely scratching the surface. These are just the things that I thought about as I played it, and continue to think about it after putting the game back on the shelf. There's a deceptive amount of commentary in the game once you start peeling back layers. Unlike a lot of military shooters, you spend time playing the insurgent, and seeing things from the opposite perspective from what we're used to. It's still an America-backed insurgency, well, until it isn't. The character arcs are worthy of note. Alex goes where the CIA sends him until they violate his conscience and turn allies into enemies.
You don't choose.
Not exactly. They're on the list.
What list?
Foreign terror organization list. I've ordered my Marines to treat Farah's army as hostiles.
What? They're our allies.
Yeah, not anymore.
He finally sticks up for what he believes in instead of going along with what he's told.
I'm going back to Urzikstan. Staying with Farah's army.
What you're doing is illegal.
I'm pretty sure everything we do is illegal. I've been an assignment my whole life. This is what I believe in.
Giving his life in the end for the cause.
They sent us in half-assed. So everyone...
Garrick offers some valid commentary on restrictive rules of engagement leading to the London terror strike.
Why have we got our hands tied? Let's just take the bloody gloves off and fight.
He hates the ROE, blames them for the massacre, and he wants the gloves off. But by the end, he doubts where this has led him.
What are we doing here?
We're cleaning up a mess.
With women and children.
They were leveraged.
They were hostages.
When you take the gloves off, you get blood on your hands, Kyle. That's how it works.
Price says you take the gloves off, you get bloody. But someone's got to do it. He also tells Hadir and Farah to stay on the right side of war.
Even war is a high ground. Stay on it.
But he kidnaps the Butcher's family, which is questionable at best. He's clearly portrayed throughout the story as being the quick-thinking guy willing to get the job done, even if it means flirting with or crossing some moral lines. Hadir wants so badly to get back at the Russians that he'll use whatever tactics and make whatever allies necessary, even as he risks becoming what he set out to destroy and alienating himself from his sister.
If you use these tactics, you are my enemy.
No exceptions?
None.
The Wolf is a bad guy. Or is he?
Have we met?
Yeah, back when you were on our side.
The Wolf was a freedom fighter? I still am, brother.
What's his angle? Farah puts a bullet in him before you, the player, ever truly get all the facts to decide for yourself. The Butcher is a horrible guy, and your blood boils watching him commit atrocities. But when you finally get the chance, can you kill him in cold blood? These character arcs realize the macro themes of the game on a micro scale, and it's honestly impressive how they did it. One last thing the game touches on is seen with the boy at the beginning of the Wolf's Den mission. He doesn't just see a parent get killed, he sees his mom get killed. That will create a terrorist. Terrorists kill civilians in London, soldiers kill those responsible die in front of their children, and those children grow up to resent the soldiers, maybe becoming the next wolf or butcher or person storming an embassy. You see the entire cycle of violence happen right in front of your eyes. Maybe it's a dumb shooting game, but I don't buy it. You can't ignore this storytelling. I set out this big project to figure out if Call of Duty 4 needed a reboot and how Infinity Ward could possibly pull one off. I must admit, for me, your mileage may vary, the 2019 game has bested the original in nearly every category, save the nostalgia factor and the I was here first advantage, which is real. But in terms of production value, ambition, storytelling, and of course, gameplay, Modern Warfare 2019 is the impossible reboot. Absolute triumph.
Hit!
I heard that.
I seem to say this every time, but if you made it this far, thank you very much for watching. I put a lot of time and work into all my videos, and if you're hearing this, I hope it means that it improved your day even just a little bit. Until next time, consider checking out this video that the almighty algorithm thinks you may like. See you next time.
Detonation is good.